9-year-old Sarah Miller sat curled up on the worn-out couch in her small apartment. Mr. Fuzzy clutched tight in her arms. The bear's loose button eye wobbled slightly as her fingers brushed over it. A familiar comfort after years of being her bedtime guardian, her secret keeper, and the one who had stayed when others hadn't. The apartment was quiet, just like most nights when her mother worked the late shift at the diner. The flickering TV filled the living room with soft blue light. Sarah wasn't really paying attention until the news anchor's voice made her sit upright. And now, we turn to President Biden's national address on supporting working-class families. President Biden appeared on screen, standing at a podium with the presidential seal behind him. His voice was calm, warm, familiar in the way grandfathers' voices often were. We must build an America where no parent has to work 3 jobs just to keep the lights on, he said. Every child deserves a chance, and every hardworking family deserves respect and opportunity. Sarah's blue eyes widened. She looked down at Mr. Fuzzy. "Did you hear that?" She whispered to the bear. "Do you think he really means it? Do you think he could help us?" The bear didn't answer, of course. One of his button eyes had been sewn back on the day. Her dad left 3 years ago now. Mom had fixed it with shaking hands and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Just then the lock clicked. Her mom stepped through the door in her blue diner uniform, blonde hair messy from a long shift. She dropped her purse by the door and smiled through her exhaustion. "Hey, sweetie. Homework done?" Sarah pointed proudly to her math worksheet. Mrs. Rodriguez checked it. "I got all the fractions right." "That's my girl." Her mom sank onto the couch next to her, arms wrapping around Sarah's shoulders. "What are you watching?" President Biden. He was talking about families, helping people like us. "Do you think he meant it?" Her mom hesitated. "I think politicians say a lot of things, but we just keep doing our best like always." Sarah nodded, then sat up straighter, an idea forming in her mind. "Mom, what if I wrote him a letter?" Her mother blinked. "A letter? To the president? I could tell him about us, about how hard you work, and I could ask him something else too." "What's that, honey?" Sarah hesitated. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I want to ask him about God." Her mother looked at her, surprised. "Every night I pray," Sarah said softly. "I pray for you to get rest, for things to get easier, for Daddy to come back. But nothing changes. I want to know if God hears kids' prayers. President Biden talks about God a lot. Maybe he knows." Her mom's eyes welled with emotion, but she nodded gently. "If you want to write, we can send it." "Really?" Sarah beamed. "Can I do it now?" She was already halfway to her room before her mother could answer. In minutes, she returned with a box of crayons and wrinkled paper. Mr. Fuzzy in tow, she carefully began. "Dear President Biden." Her letters were large and wobbly, full of color and innocence. Her mom watched from across the room, silently praying herself, praying that her daughter's letter wouldn't be ignored like so many voices often were. Sarah drew a sun at the top of the page, stick figures of herself and her mom beneath it. She wrote about her mom's 2 jobs, about praying, about Mr. Fuzzy and his loose eye. "I want to know if God has a plan for families like mine." When she finished, she showed it proudly. Her mom took the letter, noticing the tiny hearts drawn in the margins. She kissed Sarah's forehead. "Okay, sweetie. We'll mail it tomorrow. But now it's bedtime." As Sarah snuggled under her covers, Mr. Fuzzy at her side, she whispered, "Mom, how long do you think it'll take for him to answer?" Her mom sat on the edge of the bed, brushing hair from Sarah's face. "Honey, the president gets thousands of letters. He might not read everyone. But maybe he'll read mine," Sarah said hopefully. "There's always a chance." They said their nightly prayers together. Sarah added something new. "Please let President Biden read my letter. And if he knows something about God and plans, please help him tell me." Her mother left the room heart-heavy. At the kitchen table, she reread the crayon-filled letter, emotions overwhelming her. So much hope in such small hands. The next morning, they stood by the mailbox. "Are you ready?" her mom asked. Sarah nodded. "Yes, I think something good is going to happen." As the letter dropped into the box with a soft clang, neither of them knew just how right she was. Sarah marked an X on her calendar. It had been 3 days since they mailed the letter to President Biden. She had created a small corner in her bedroom. She called the waiting space, a pillow, a flashlight, Mr. Fuzzy, and a calendar where she crossed off each passing day. Every night she added a new X and whispered to Mr. Fuzzy, maybe tomorrow. But tomorrow kept not coming. At school she told her best friend Jenny about the letter. I asked him about God, Sarah whispered as they opened their lunch boxes. And about families like ours. Jenny's eyes widened. Wow, do you think he'll write back? Before Sarah could answer, Tommy Wilson, who always sat too close and too loud, leaned over. You wrote the president a letter? With crayons? Sarah's face flushed. It's not dumb, Jenny snapped, but Tommy just laughed. Biden's not going to answer a baby letter with a teddy bear drawing. Sarah bit her lip and hugged her lunchbox to her chest. That night she asked her mom, do you think the president will really read it? Her mother paused while washing dishes. I think anything's possible. But remember, sweetie, even if he doesn't answer, God might. Sarah didn't respond. She just picked up Mr. Fuzzy and traced the stitches on his button eye. Days passed. Each one ended the same. Another X, another whispered prayer, another sigh. At the diner, Sarah's mom started checking the mailbox before her shift. Nothing. Still no word? Maria, the head waitress, asked one morning. Jessica shook her head. She's trying so hard to be patient. But every day it's a little harder. Maria smiled kindly. Sometimes children have more faith than we do. By the second week, Sarah's prayers started changing. Dear God, she whispered one night, are you too busy like the president? Her mom, overhearing through the thin wall, clutched the utility bill tighter. The numbers looked the same every month, too high, too hopeless. That night she sat Sarah in her lap, even though Sarah was almost too big now. God's never too busy, she said. But sometimes, the answers come in ways we don't expect. Remember your old boots with holes? Sarah nodded. Then Mrs. Rodriguez gave me her granddaughter's boots. Exactly. God didn't give us new boots from a store. He gave us what we needed, just differently. Sarah hugged her tighter. But at school, Tommy wouldn't let it go. You hear back yet? He asked with a sneer by the swings. Maybe President Biden's too busy dealing with real problems? Sarah finally snapped. She marched up to him, fists clenched. You're just mean because you don't believe in anything. That doesn't mean I can't. Tommy stepped back, startled. Miss Thompson, their teacher, rushed over. Is everything okay? Tommy keeps making fun of my letter, Sarah said, breathing hard. Miss Thompson looked at Tommy. We've talked about kindness before, haven't we? She sent him to the reflection bench. Then she knelt beside Sarah. You know, Miss Thompson said, when I was your age, I wrote a letter to President Jimmy Carter. I waited weeks, too. Did he write back? Sarah asked. He did. But even before that, writing the letter made me brave. Sarah's eyes sparkled. That night, she drew a tiny heart next to her ex. When her mother asked why, she smiled. To remind me that writing it mattered, too. Jessica watched her daughter in awe. The world had been heavy on Sarah's little shoulders. But still, she stood up still, she hoped. Later, as Jessica sorted bills again, she whispered a prayer of her own. Please, if nothing else, let her keep believing. Let her keep that soft heart. In her bed, Sarah held Mr. Fuzzy close and whispered a new prayer. God, if President Biden doesn't answer, that's okay. Just please help Mom not to cry so much, and help me to keep believing. Even when Tommy sees mean things, amen. Then she kissed Mr. Fuzzy's button eye and waited. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that tomorrow would change everything. Tuesday morning started like every other. Cereal, a messy braid, Mr. Fuzzy sitting beside the milk carton. Sarah's mother kissed her forehead. Don't forget your math homework. I won't, Sarah mumbled, sliding her binder into her backpack. She didn't check the mailbox. Not today. It hurt less if she waited until after school. On the school bus, Jenny was chatting about her upcoming birthday party. But Sarah's mind drifted. It had been 32 days since she mailed the letter. 32 X's on her calendar. Sarah, Jenny waved a hand in front of her face. Are you even listening? Sorry, she murmured. Just thinking about the letter. Jenny gave her a soft smile. Maybe it just takes a long time for important people to answer. Sarah wanted to believe that. Halfway through math class, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Chen, the school secretary, stepped in and whispered something to Miss Thompson. Miss Thompson blinked in surprise. "Sarah Miller," she said, her voice unusually bright. "Please gather your things and go with Mrs. Chen to the office." A quiet murmur rippled through the classroom. Sarah's hands shook as she packed her bag. Was something wrong? Did something happen to her mom? Was Mrs. Rodriguez okay? Tommy called out just loud enough for others to hear. Maybe President Biden sent the FBI instead of a letter. "Tommy, that's enough," Miss Thompson snapped. "Ulisuf." Sarah followed Mrs. Chen through the quiet hall. Her heart pounded with every step. When they reached the office, Principal Roberts was waiting, wearing a smile so wide it looked like it might fall off his face. "Come in, Sarah," he said warmly. "There's someone very important who'd like to speak with you." Sarah stepped inside. There was a woman in a black blazer sitting beside the phone. A seal on the folder in her lap read, "White House Office of Presidential Correspondence." Principal Roberts placed a cup of water in front of her. "Just in case." The woman smiled. "Sarah, I'm Ms. Parker. I'm calling from President Biden's staff. There's someone here who would like to speak with you." Sarah's fingers tightened around her cup. Her throat went dry. Then a warm voice came through the speaker. "Hello, Sarah. This is Angela Morrison. I work with President Biden. Your letter touched all of us deeply." Sarah's eyes widened. You got it?" "Yes, we did." "The president read it himself. He was especially moved by what you wrote about your mom, about God, and your teddy bear, Mr. Fuzzy." Sarah stared, speechless. "President Biden would like to meet you," Angela continued gently. "We'd like to invite you and your mother to Washington, D.C. At that moment, the door burst open. Jessica Miller rushed inside in her diner uniform, cheeks flushed with worry. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on Sarah, safe, smiling, stunned. "Mrs. Miller," said Angela from the phone, "thank you for joining us. President Biden would like to invite you and your daughter to Washington for a personal meeting." Jessica sat slowly, gripping Sarah's hand. I don't understand." Ms. Parker opened her folder and slid documents across the principal's desk. Travel, hotel, security clearance. All arranged. You only have to say yes. Sarah looked up at her mom, eyes wide with hope. "Mom, can we go?" Jessica hesitated. "The diner. My other job. I can't just—" "We've spoken to your employers," Angela said. "They've approved the time off. You'll have 3 days." Principal Roberts smiled. "And of course, Sarah will be excused from school." Jessica glanced at her daughter, those same bright eyes that had watched her work. 2 jobs without complaint. She exhaled, trembling. "Yes," she said at last. "We'll go." Ulisuf. That night was a blur of packing and instructions. Ms. Parker reviewed security steps, while Angela sent their travel itinerary. Departure, Friday morning. 6:00 a.m. sharp. Sarah could barely sleep. At one point, she sat up in bed, Mr. Fuzzy in her lap, whispering, "Tomorrow I'm telling Tommy Wilson. Not to brag, just so he knows." I believed. Ulisuf. When she walked into class the next morning, whispers spread fast. Miss Thompson raised her eyebrows. "Everything okay, Sarah?" Sarah stood tall. "I'm going to meet President Biden," she said. "He read my letter." The classroom exploded. Jenny jumped up to hug her. Even Tommy Wilson looked stunned. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. That afternoon, Sarah ran home faster than ever before. She threw open the door and dashed to her waiting space. Mr. Fuzzy sat at attention. "It worked," she whispered, hugging him tight. He read it. "We're going to Washington." Ulisuf. That night, as her mom tucked her in, Sarah asked the question that had never really left her heart. "Do you think this means God really does hear our prayers?" Jessica thought for a long time. "I think it means we should never stop believing, even when it seems impossible." Mr. Fuzzy was coming with them, of course. He'd been part of the story from the very beginning, and now he was going to the White House. Friday morning arrived before the sun did. The alarm buzzed at 5 a.m., but Sarah was already awake, her pink dress laid out neatly, her small suitcase packed the night before with help from Mrs. Rodriguez. Mr. Fuzzy had been brushed gently, though his loose button eye still dangled a little. "Should we fix it?" Sarah asked. Jessica smiled. "No time now, honey. Besides, I think it gives him character." Ulisuf. At exactly 6 a.m., A sleek black car pulled up in front of their apartment building. A kind-looking woman in a dark blazer stepped out. "Good morning. Sarah, Mrs. Miller, I'm Agent Chen. I'll be escorting you to the airport." Sarah's eyes widened. "You're from the Secret Service." Agent Chen smiled. "Sort of. Ready for your big adventure?" Sarah nodded, holding Mr. Fuzzy tight as they slid into the car. It was both Sarah and Jessica's first time flying. The airport felt like a maze of blinking lights and important people in uniforms. Sarah pressed her face to the terminal window. "Mom, the planes look like giant birds." Jessica, trying to hide her own nerves, squeezed her daughter's hand. "We're in good hands, sweetie." On the flight, they were given special snacks, and the stewardess even offered extra cookies from the White House. Sarah saved the wrapper, tucking it between Mr. Fuzzy's arms. "We're in heaven's neighborhood," she whispered to him, smiling. They landed in Washington, D.C. just after noon. Another car was waiting. Agent Chen greeted them again and pointed out monuments along the way. "That's the Washington Monument. And over there, that's the Lincoln Memorial." Sarah pressed her face to the window again. "Mom, it's like a history book, but real." Their hotel was beautiful. Tall windows, velvet curtains, a fruit basket with a note from the White House. "Welcome, Sarah and Mrs. Miller. We're so glad you're here." That evening, after a room-service dinner of cheeseburgers and strawberry milkshakes, Jessica read over the briefing from Ms. Parker. "No electronics," she said. "Dress respectfully. Speak clearly and—" Sarah leaned closer. "And what?" Jessica smiled. "Be yourself." The next morning, they stood in front of the White House gates. Sarah held Mr. Fuzzy under one arm, the other hand tightly gripping her mom's. Inside, they passed through multiple layers of security. Uniformed men and women nodded, scanning IDs and gently checking Mr. Fuzzy, who, after a brief inspection of his loose eye, was officially cleared for entry. Ms. Parker met them at the final checkpoint. "You look perfect, Sarah," she said with a warm smile. "And you too, Mr. Fuzzy." They were led down long hallways with thick carpets and portraits of presidents past. Sarah tried to memorize everything. Then they were guided into a smaller room with big windows and comfortable chairs. "This is where President Biden will meet you," Ms. Parker said. "He'll be here shortly." Sarah sat stiffly, smoothing her dress over and over. Jessica leaned in and whispered, "Just speak from your heart, baby." The door opened, and then he walked in, President Joe Biden. He wasn't surrounded by cameras or crowds, just a calm presence, his kind blue eyes locking instantly onto Sarah. "You must be Sarah," he said, a smile stretching across his face. Sarah stood quickly, nearly dropping Mr. Fuzzy. "Yes, sir. This is Mr. Fuzzy." "Well, it's good to meet both of you," the president said warmly. "That's quite a bear. Looks like he's been through a lot with you." "He has," Sarah said. "His eye's a little loose, but Mom fixed it once." Biden leaned closer, bending slightly to inspect the bear. "You know," he said gently, "sometimes the things that aren't perfect are the ones that hold the deepest stories. That loose button? It shows love. It shows holding on." Jessica blinked back tears. President Biden took a seat across from them. Then, unexpectedly, he scooted his chair closer, so he was right at Sarah's level. "I read your letter very carefully," he said. "So did my entire staff." Sarah swallowed hard. "Sir, I wanted to ask, does God really hear us, even when nothing seems to change?" President Biden looked down for a moment, gathering his words. "When I lost my first wife and daughter in an accident, I asked the same question," he said softly. "And again, when my son Beau passed away." Sarah's eyes widened. "I don't always understand how prayer works, but I believe this. God hears every single word, but his answers, they come in unexpected ways." He pointed to Mr. Fuzzy, that little bear. With his loose button, he's a reminder that healing doesn't have to be neat. It just has to be real. Sarah glanced down at the bear in her lap. For the first time, the loose button didn't make her sad. It made her feel brave. Then she asked, "Sir, what about my mom? She works really hard, but it's still hard." President Biden turned to Jessica. "Tell me," he said. So she did. She told him about cleaning offices after waiting tables, about missed birthdays and nights spent calculating bills, about raising a child alone. and keeping hope alive. The president listened, nodding thoughtfully. Then he pulled something from his pocket. It was Sarah's letter, still crinkled, still colorful. The drawing of her and her mother beneath a yellow sun clearly visible. "This," he said, "moved me more than I can explain." He looked at Jessica. "We're launching a new initiative, one for families like yours. Job training, childcare, flexible hours. It's called the Loose Button Program. Your story helped shape it." Jessica gasped. Sarah stared. "We'd like you to be one of the first to join." Sarah turned to her mom. "Say yes." Jessica could barely speak, her voice cracking with emotion. "Yes," she whispered. As the meeting came to a close, the president reached into a box and handed Sarah a small gift. Inside was a shiny gold button. "For Mr. Fuzzy," he said, "in case you ever want to fix his eye. But only if you want to, because sometimes broken things tell the best stories." Sarah looked down at the bear in her arms, then at the button in her hand. She smiled. Sarah held the small box in one hand, the shiny gold button glinting inside, and Mr. Fuzzy in the other, his loose eye tilting as always. President Biden waited patiently, watching her with soft, grandfatherly eyes. After a long pause, Sarah finally said, her voice steady, "Sir, I think Mr. Fuzzy should keep his loose eye." The president raised his eyebrows, smiling. "And why's that?" Sarah looked at her bear lovingly. "Because it tells our story, about when Daddy left, about how Mom fixed him, about how we kept going, even when things were hard. His loose eye reminds me that we didn't give up." Jessica gasped softly, covering her mouth, tears welling in her eyes again. Biden leaned in. "That's a very wise answer. Sarah, you've reminded us all that imperfection is part of the journey, that a little brokenness doesn't make something less valuable. Sometimes it makes it more." He glanced at his aide standing nearby. "Would it be okay if we shared your story with the country? Your letter, your teddy bear, and that special eye? I think families everywhere could use that kind of hope." Sarah nodded. Then a new idea formed in her mind. She held out the box with the button. "Can we give this to someone else? Someone who needs it more?" The president blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "There's this boy at school, Tommy. He was really mean about my letter at first. But I think maybe he's just sad. Maybe he has his own loose button too." For a moment the room was silent. Even the aides standing by the wall looked moved. President Biden stood up slowly and said with a soft smile, "Sarah, you're not just wise, you're kind. And that kind of kindness, that's what changes the world." In the hours that followed, the president and his team briefed Jessica and Sarah on the Loose Button Initiative, a new national pilot program that would provide job training, family support, and flexible childcare options for working parents across the country. Inspired by a teddy bear's loose eye and a child's faith, Sarah's letter, crayon writing and all, would be framed and placed in the white house correspondence room, with a note beside it. Sometimes the most important messages come in the simplest handwriting. When Sarah and her mom returned to their hotel, news of their visit had already spread. That evening on television, President Biden announced the launch of the initiative, holding up Sarah's drawing during the press conference. This was drawn by a 9-year-old girl who reminded us that the smallest voices can carry the biggest truths. The next morning at the airport, Agent Chen was waiting to drive them, but she wasn't alone. She handed Sarah a thick manila envelope. "From the president," she said. "He asked you to open it on the plane." On board, Sarah opened it carefully. Inside were dozens of letters from parents, kids, and grandparents around the country. Many had drawn their own versions of Mr. Fuzzy. Some had sent photos of their broken toys, their patched-up backpacks, their loose button stories. And then, nestled inside, was a letter with a gold star on the corner. Jessica opened it and began to read aloud. "Dear Sarah, you probably don't remember me, but I remember you. 3 years ago, I made a mistake. A big one. I left. I've been too ashamed to reach out. Until I saw you on TV. Until I heard you talk about how broken things can still be special. That gave me the courage to write. I live in Ohio now. I've been getting help, trying to become someone worthy of being in your life again. If you and your mom are willing, I'd like to meet. Just coffee. Just to talk. Enclosed is something I've carried every day since I left, a button from my old police uniform. Maybe it can be my loose button, a reminder that I was broken once. But I want to be better. Love. Dad. Ulisuv. Jessica couldn't hold back the tears. Sarah didn't say anything at first. She just looked out the window at the cotton candy clouds. Then down at the button, old, scratched, worn smooth on one side. Then she turned to her mother. Can we try? Jessica nodded, voice trembling. We can try. Ulisuv. When they landed, a surprise was waiting. At the gate stood Mrs. Rodriguez, Jenny, Miss Thompson, and the entire class, including Tommy Wilson. They held up a giant banner. Welcome home, Sarah, with dozens of tiny teddy bears drawn all across it. Tommy stepped forward awkwardly, something in his hands. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I was wrong. He opened his hands to reveal a small broken action figure with a missing arm. They used to hide him. But maybe broken things can still matter. Sarah smiled. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the gold button from the president's gift box. Here, she said. Not to fix him, just to remind you that broken things tell special stories too. Tommy's eyes went wide. He nodded. And for once he had nothing to say. Ulisuv. That night, Sarah sat in her waiting space, Mr. Fuzzy by her side. She looked at the calendar. The row of X's that once felt like disappointment now looked like strength. Every X was a day she didn't give up. She picked up Mr. Fuzzy, kissed his loose eye, and whispered, I think I understand now. Sometimes God's answers come slow, and sometimes they come with buttons. Across America, families were sharing their own loose button stories. On news channels, in church groups, in school projects, the Loose Button Initiative became more than a program. It became a symbol that you didn't have to be perfect, that faith, love, and kindness could hold a family together, that even the smallest letter could make the biggest difference. And that one little girl with one little bear had changed everything.